Morning everyone, and welcome to the London FIMI Forum organised by the EU delegation to the United Kingdom. This is the place every year where we get an inside look at the state of foreign information manipulation and interference, FIMI. Put simply, that is foreign states attempting to use misleading information to sway public opinion and get an advantage in an information war. But this year is different. From a US administration deeply skeptical about the very notion of disinformation to agentic AI, the landscape is changing fast. Throughout the day, we will look at what is new, how it is being handled, and what is happening on the front line of this information war as Russia becomes more audacious. Before then, some housekeeping points though. In the event of a fire alarm, we should all head out through the main entrance, and that's opposite this lecture theatre, and there will be staff to direct everyone to the meeting point. And the EU delegation is streaming this event live on their LinkedIn channel. So to be clear, this is on the record. So now, to kick off the day, please could you welcome our host, the EU Ambassador to the UK, Pedro Serrano.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you and good morning to all. Many thanks, Jessica. Many thanks to all of you for being here. Many thanks to all the great panelists that we have. Actually, I think the very wide audience that we have from representatives of government and public institutions to members of academia and think tanks and business shows actually the width, the breadth of the problem that we're trying to tackle here, and also the geographical breadth, because we have representatives that come from other continents as well, of course many Europeans and certainly UK, but it is a problem that is worldwide, and that we have to tackle worldwide. We have to tackle in a very interdisciplinary manner. The European Union has been addressing foreign information manipulation already for almost 10 years, I would say, as an issue per se, part of its hybrid strategies. It started with Russia disinformation, and actually colleagues tell me that the term FIMI, foreign information manipulation interference, was coined by the External Action Service, which, as you know, is the Foreign Office of the European Union, back in 2018. So it's good always when you have a problem to put a name on it and identify it if you want to address it more effectively. And Jessica, sorry. I have a daughter called Cecilia, so I slide quickly into the Cecil part. So Jessica was saying how the threat has increased immensely. In 2016, the then High Representative for Foreign Security Policy in the European Union, Federica Mogherini, she wrote a report on the state of security and the security strategy. And she said very clearly there that we were living in a contested, competitive, and complex world. Well, if anything, the complexity has increased, competitiveness has acquired new dimensions, and the contested, actually the antagonism at geostrategic level in the world has only risen dramatically, unfortunately, in the last years. And of course, the invasion and aggression of Russia to Ukraine in 2022 has been a triggering element for more aggressivity on the side of Russia, but also on the side of those who are supporting Russia. In a struggle that, let's not kid ourselves now, we'll come back to this later, it's about democracy. It's about our values. And this is what we're trying to face. And open societies, of course, as ours, who some believe are more fragile. But we have to show them that we're not more fragile, that actually through democracy, through freedom of speech and movement, we can nevertheless respond to all the challenges that are being presented to us. These challenges, we're seeing them, again, definitely in Ukraine, where the war continues unabated and the aggression continues unabated, but also in other parts of Europe. And in the last weeks, we've seen how Strange objects have been flying in airports in Germany, in Denmark. Airspace has been violated in Estonia, also in Poland. So, if anything, the threat and the challenge is increasing. And this is reflected in the External Action Service third FIMI report on 2025. Main conclusions is the increase of the aggressive use of information manipulation, and very clearly placing FIMI within the hybrid arsenal that states use to destabilize others, to change and impact their societies and their political structures. This is the threat that we're facing. The report refers to incidents in more than 90 countries in 2024. As you know, 2024 was an important electoral year throughout the world, actually, with big countries like India also having electoral processes, but particularly in Europe. And in Europe, well, the European Union had, as you know, elections to the European Parliament. There were also elections in the United Kingdom. And the report identifies, by the way, 42 Russian FIMI attempts during the June European elections. But the pressure is much broader than these numbers. The pressure is every day in many ways that we don't even cannot even detect easily and see. It affects individuals and organizations and institutions and media. So it is really very multidimensional. We've also seen impressive FIMI activity around the elections in Moldova just very recently. In the good part of things, our democratic process have not suffered, and the elections have proceeded without prejudice to our democracy and our democratic systems in Europe, and including in Moldova, which was really under huge pressure. We have had now an assembly elected that responds to what we believe is the will of the Moldovan people, which is to come closer to the rest of Europe, to the European Union. It's a candidate member, as you know, and to pursue its democratic path. So we are able to fight these attacks, and we're able to succeed. But we should not be complacent. And I imagine that today you will be discussing, among other things, you will be discussing artificial intelligence, AI. And this is, I think, what everybody's talking about in town, in every town in the world practically, with to regulate or not to regulate, that is the question. So, of course, it is a very complex question. On the European Union side, we are in favor of protecting the rights, the interest of our citizens, and I think that will remain a predominant factor in this very complex debate. And of course, we are all seeing how AI can be used as a very powerful force to pursue disinformation and information manipulation with all kinds of new instruments that can give an image of veracity, of reality, to things that are not real, to speeches that will never take place and words that have never been pronounced. And this is a huge, huge concern. At the same time, AI can also be a very powerful instrument to fight against foreign information manipulation interference. And we have to see how it is that part that we can use and that will end up prevailing. I'm sure that you will be discussing this later today and look forward to any conclusions that you may bring. Before concluding these brief introductory remarks, we're in the United Kingdom, and I want to praise the partnership that the European Union has with the United Kingdom on these matters. And 2025 has been a very important year. We had the first summit post-Brexit between the European Union leaders and the United Kingdom Prime Minister in May, 19 May, and a full program of work was agreed to in order to enhance our engagement in security and defense, in prosperity, in people-to-people contact. And security and defense are particularly all of them are relevant, and actually they're all interrelated. But security and defense is, of course, what we're talking about here today. And amongst the agreements, there was an agreement on a security and defense partnership that was signed between the European Union and the United Kingdom. And this partnership foresees precisely greater exchanges between our experts in the fight against hybrid warfare and on foreign information and manipulation interference. So we will be working, we had already from the outset worked very closely with the UK, but we will be working even closer now. Now, in conclusion, the moment is a very serious and worrying moment, so no room for complacency at all, quite the contrary. You will have heard the Danish Prime Minister, after the incidents in Denmark, refer to the situation as one of hybrid war. If you have listened to or read the speech of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, you will also have seen that she says very clearly, we are in a fight. We're in a fight for our values, we're in a fight for our security, we're in a fight to ensure our economic security as well. And this is really a fight for democracy in the world at the end, and this is what is at stake. And of course, we cannot afford to lose this fight. So many thanks for being here today, for helping us reflect on how to continue advancing in combating information manipulation and interference. And I really look forward to the conclusions that you will draw at the end of today's discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Our first panel will look at countering so-called FIMI, and we looked at this a year ago and returning to ask, what has changed? The answer, as we will hear, is a lot. We have in the White House an administration that is much more skeptical about disinformation as a concept and its effects, and platforms are moving away from active moderation, and agentic AI is approaching fast. The Russians look like they're attempting, as we've heard, to test European responses. MiG-31 jets briefly entered Estonian airspace last month, and there has been multiple drone incursions. At the same time, social media campaigns are continuing. So this first panel is about what's new and what to do about it. We are joined by experts with a wealth of knowledge and experience in this field. Filip Grzegorzewski is from the EEAS, the European External Action Service, and will provide insights on the EU's latest threat report. Konrad Adamowicz from Poland will share his country's experiences. David Salvo from the German Marshall Fund, and Carl Miller is from Demos, and they will discuss the evolving face of FIMI. So let's begin with Filip. Filip, what's new about the external environment as far as you're concerned compared to a year ago? And from your point of view, how is the EU meeting this challenge?
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica, very much. And let me start by saying how happy I am to be back to London, to this conference. And by the attendance, I judge that it's something that you care about. I'll start where Ambassador Serrano finished, which is that this is not an information threat anymore. This is a security threat, an existential threat to not only the European Union, but to the world as we know it. And the context is set by the Russian escalation. So, Jessica, when you're asking me what's new, my first point would be that we are in a phase of an escalation, which is being imposed by Russia. And I'm sure that Konrad will be talking about a concrete example of how FIMI, foreign information manipulation interference operations conducted by the threat actor, Russia, link with everything that goes beyond the information sphere with the kinetic operations. If you look at what has happened over the last month or so, what happened on the 10th of September, you'll see that it's planned, it's organized, malign, with an intention. And it meets all the criteria of FIMI. And as Ambassador Serrano said, FIMI is not only something that we came up within the European Union to frame the problem in order to tackle it, but it became a global standard now, a golden standard, adopted by the UK, adopted by the G7, adopted by our partners with whom we are concluding the security and defense partnerships. So the first element of what's new is Russian escalation. The second element of what's new is the accelerating strategic rivalry between the US and China. Whether we like it or not, we are somehow part of it, and we have to find answers to how we position ourselves. And the bad news for us is that China is supporting Russia. And this goes also into the sphere of FIMI, of foreign information manipulation interference. And you'll probably be able to see in a second on the screen, hopefully. Can we? Great. That's the galaxy of FIMI operations. Jessica asked about the report that we've published, the report that Ambassador Serrano referred to, the report that we published in March this year. And the centerfold of the report, when you open it, there are some copies there. And if not, we can download from our website, is the galaxy of FIMI, a visual presentation of how those different operations conducted by Russia, but also China, are actually working. It's not only beautiful, but it's also quite telling. And we've managed to put on one picture plenty of dots, some 19,500 dots representing disinformation incidents. And as you can see, there are three colors there, red, blue, and white. Red, Russia. Blue, here, China. And white, something that we have not actually managed to attribute. Does it mean that we don't know? No, we do know. But our methodology is solid enough to link what we know with the facts. And if we don't have 100% solid evidence, we call it still unattributed. So I encourage you to have a closer look at that. That's another element of what's new. And it all comes from cooperation with our partners. So it's not only the things that we need to do, but the things that we actually do that I would like to bring to this discussion. And what we do is we've really stepped up our game in terms of methodology and capability to spot the problem and then to exchange information fast. And I'm really happy to say that the UK is part of it through a number of different networks, G7RM being one, Security and Defense Partnership being the direct instrument for us working together. But we, within the European Union, we have other elements as well of cooperation, and Rapid Alert System is one. That's a network that brings together all the member states, that allows us to exchange information when things happen, and that's also an element for us to build community based on trust. Is there anyone in the room who doesn't know EU versus disinfo? Raise your hand. Don't be shy. Anyone who doesn't know? Yes, thank you. I'm really happy that you have the guts to say, I don't know. That's the great starting point, and it gives me a chance to tell you what the EU versus disinfo is. So Ambassador Serrano said that we've started looking at disinformation coming from Russia 10 years ago, and it started with setting up a portal, EU versus Disinfo, mapping disinformation cases coming from Russia. Now we've collected thousands of those cases that are well documented, almost 20,000 now, almost 20,000 cases. And when you think about the AI and how the AI links to disinformation, imagine what a game changer it would be if ChatGPT, before giving you an answer, checked with EU versus Disinfo database whether it's disinformation or not. So that's a very concrete example of what we are working on now. So EU versus Disinfo, sign up, like and subscribe. You'll receive a newsletter every week with a description of the latest disinformation attacks coming our way. So EU versus Disinfo, it's quite a powerful, unique tool, unique database, open to everyone. Let me stop here in terms of what we are doing, concluding with a call for speeding up our cooperation and speeding up the way we tackle FIMI, increasing the impact of our actions. So we have to be more creative in order to do it. We have to be as creative or more creative than the threat actors. And the last thing that is needed to achieve it all is scaling up. So the fact that we are here in this room together, for me, it's the best way of seeing that each of us can bring something new to this discussion, because we all come from different places, and scaling up is something that we actually need to be more efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really useful overview. Turning to you, Konrad Adamowicz from the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Poland, and you are on the EU and NATO front line. You also had elections a few months ago. So in the last year, how has the world looked to you as far as FIMI is concerned?
Thank you very much for the question and for the opportunity to be here. It's a great honor, and I'm really happy to see room basically full with people are interested in the in FIMI. When you look at the last year, you can quite easily argue that nothing really changed. One could make an argument that nothing really changed. The war in Ukraine continues on. Russia keeps on utilizing the same techniques, tactics, and procedures in order to poison our infospheres. Russia keeps on attacking both our infospheres and our borders in a hybrid manner. And cooperation with social media platforms remains difficult. So basically the same thing that we've seen for the last few years. But I firmly stand on the position that everything changed last year. Everything changed because now we see how the escalation of Russian activities at our borders is finally catching up with general public perception and opinions about it. We see that Russian incursions in the EU and NATO borders are being met with a strong and unified response. Our Prime Minister from Poland, Donald Tusk, said in March last year, March this year, that we are living in the pre-war period. And it sounded a little bit harsh a few months ago, but now it seems unfortunately quite reasonable. Have a look at the drone attack on 10th of September in Poland. The attack was no mistake, and I call it attack, not an incursion. Russian drones were entering Polish infosphere for hours, Polish aerospace for hours to come, I believe 7 hours, dozens of them. At the same time, we were monitoring the situation in our infosphere. And at the same time, when the drones were flying in Poland, we've seen another attack on our infosphere and with the narratives that Russians were trying to instill, utilizing this particular attack. And they done it quite well. They knew that pro-Russian sentiment in Poland is something that is just not going to fly. That's something that doesn't work in Poland. So what they did, they tried to put a blame on the drone attack on Poland on Ukraine. And this is just the example, one of the examples of Russian tactics in my country. What Russians are trying to achieve in Poland is trying to decrease the support for Ukraine, both in our society and in our let's say political actors. They've been doing it for years, and but so far we remain quite resilient. I mean, by we I mean Polish society remain quite resilient to that, but it's taking its toll. I would also like to point out that if you want to look what Russia wants to achieve and what Russia fears most, you need to look at their targets. And in our infosphere, what they want to target with their FIMI campaigns, disinformation campaigns that they made, they were trying to target our social coherence, the unity of NATO, sense of belonging to international community. That's what they tried to achieve with this information attack. And I think and they wanted to achieve that because that's what they fear most. The unified, strong, and fast response from European Union and NATO. And they made the bet that NATO unity is going to break under the weight of 2,000 drones. It did not. NATO, it was a NATO operation where I believe German reconnaissance detected the missiles, and it was Dutch and Italian military that were supporting Polish protection of Polish border. The response from NATO or from the EU was quick and decisive. So Russians, in a way, did not achieve that goal. They were sure that the unity is going to break because this is the only thing that they can hope for. Because if the unity of NATO breaks, then it leaves an empty space for Russians to fill in with their own influence. But it did not break, and I hope that it will not break in the future. And it's also another thing that really changed. The opinion that Russia can actually be beaten, not only in the battlefield, but also in the infosphere. And the best example for that is what happened in Moldova a few weeks ago. Russians invested enormous resources into trying to sway the Moldovan election their way. Enormous resources. That was one of their top priority. If you look at things that they were trying to do in Moldova, that was, I think, the biggest operation, the biggest FIMI operation, basically hybrid operation that I have ever seen. And yet they failed spectacularly. And what happened in Moldova should be a guiding light to us all here, because one thing that Russia is trying to do is to convey the image of Russia as unbeatable, extremely smart and intelligent 5D chess playing force that is easily winning with this old, boring, and slow West. They do not. They lose all the time. I have full dossier of Russian FIMI operations in Poland that were a total failure. But due to the logic of the way that we communicate. We often communicate about quite successful or big Russian operations with these really cool names like the ones that you've seen, Portal Combat, Doppelganger, Storm 1516. It sounds really cool. In fact, it's not. This is just, some guys sitting in Moscow and St. Petersburg and posting some hateful stuff online. It's nothing, there's nothing shiny and interesting about it. But we made it that way. So what we will try to do, and I encourage every single one of you here in this room, and I will encourage our European and NATO partners to do it next year, is to put some light on Russian failures in their operations. Because they fail a lot, all the time. I don't want to overstay my welcome here with my statements, but I would love to maybe later on to talk a little bit about the situation in Poland and what Russians were doing and how we were responding to that. But if I want to leave one impression with everyone here, is two impressions, sorry. Russia can be beaten, both in the battlefield and in the infosphere, and they are not as good as they want us to think that they are.
Fantastic, thank you. So, turning to you, David is from the German Marshall Fund and has a perspective from both the US and Europe, which is really interesting. David, what's changed as far as FIMI is concerned in a year, from your point of view?
Thanks, Jessica, and a big thanks to Ambassador Serrano and the delegation team for having me here. I think times like these, it's even more important to maintain transatlantic links on these important issues. So I appreciate the opportunity to inject a little American color into this conversation. I'll talk briefly about what's changed in the threat landscape, in the policy landscape, but also in the societal debate over FIMI. In the threat area, there's just a proliferation of state and non-state actors engaging in FIMI operations. And the reason's very simple. These are low cost, relatively low risk, and best case scenario, high impact operations. Although I certainly agree with Konrad, they largely fail most of the time. We obviously are going to hear a lot about Russia today, and for good reason. And we know that China and other nation states like Iran are sort of the primary purveyors of FIMI around the world, and certainly here in the Euro-Atlantic space. And while I promised I would be diplomatic about what's happening in my own country, I would be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge that there is debate here in Europe about whether the United States and proxies of the current administration are also purveyors of FIMI operations, particularly here in Europe. So I at least have to acknowledge that on the list of FIMI actors, state actors, there are more countries than just the normal big three that we often refer to in our shared community. There are more threat vectors than ever before. I certainly would like to emphasize Filip's point that hybrid operations are FIMI operations. Sabotage, drone incursions, assassination attempts, even undersea cable cutting. These hybrid threats, these kinetic threats, are FIMI threats. They share the same objectives. They are designed to destabilize institutions and governments. They are designed to sow chaos in societies, and they are designed to undermine trust in democracy. Full stop. These have the same objectives. So there's simply an explosion of threat vectors. This is not just about mis and disinformation anymore. In fact, it never has been. We just focused, I think, heavily on that particular dimension of the FIMI threat. But in the info space itself, there's an evolving set of tactics. We are increasingly seeing an increase in laundering of state propaganda, particularly from Russia, through authentic voices in our own countries. This means funneling money through so-called think tanks and even academic centers, but it also means working with ordinary citizens or influential voices in our body politic, often using money to grease the wheels and get these authentic and influential voices in our countries to essentially regurgitate state propaganda without any sort of attribution or links to where these talking points are written. That is an increasing tactic that we are seeing. It's especially prevalent in the United States, but it's also happening in Europe. And money, of course, keeps this going. And cryptocurrency, and Konrad, you mentioned Moldova, cryptocurrency was used ad nauseum to launder money to produce vote buying schemes, but also to fund tons of mis and disinformation operations. And though they largely failed, I think it's a troubling trend that crypto is being essentially laundered from Russia through Central Asia into Europe or the United States to get into the pockets of European, American, other citizens to do the bidding of foreign state powers. That is extremely troubling, and because it's a new threat vector, we're only at the beginning of figuring out how to defend against this type of threat. On the policy side, obviously, the elephant in the room is the United States no longer sees FIMI as a national security threat to be reckoned with. I find that as an American extremely troubling. As a transatlantic advocate, I find that extremely troubling, but it doesn't mean that Europe should stop raising these threats with Washington. We have to just change the framing. I think focusing on kinetic and hybrid is important. If you talk about information, it's going to lose the room. So we have to focus on the types of national security threats that the administration believes is actually important to American and transatlantic interests. So drone incursions, things like that, cable cutting, these are threats to US and NATO military infrastructure. These are national and collective security threats. I'm not saying that we should use this to sort of piggyback and bring in the information dimension, because I think right now it will be reflexively dismissed, but we have to keep it at least in the conversation. And part of the way to keep that in the conversation is through civil society. So though civil society is being relatively battered right now, especially in the States, we have to be able to have a conversation about the insidious nature of the information manipulation threat. And especially with the AI advances, like the speed and scale of these operations is obviously, they're increasing, and their efficacy, I think, because the technology makes these operations more convincing, has the potential to be more convincing as well. Finally, on the policy side, there's this transatlantic debate over regulation. And I understand that European diplomats, British diplomats have to balance many equities in terms of trade, national security, debates over regulation, but we can't lose sight of the fact that regulation is an instrument to combat FIMI. And this leads me to my point about the societal debate, where yes, there's now this loud voice in the room that regulation of the information space, countering FIMI operations is synonymous with censorship. That debate is hugely prevalent in the United States, but it's gaining momentum here in Europe and in the UK as well. We have to turn that argument on its head collectively. Civil servants, civil society, we have to be working together to we've completely ceded that public debate to that loud voice in the room, and it's wrong, because to say that free speech absolutism is sort of a sacrosanct principle, it's a red herring argument, because every day there are algorithms making content moderation choices every second that inform how citizens consume information. So to say that regulation is actually a tool of censorship, I believe is a red herring. We have to do a better job in concert, civil society with civil servants across the transatlantic space, of pointing out the fallacy of that. Countering FIMI is actually important. Regulation is a tool to achieve that end, because regulation holds the tech companies' feet to the fire. It can be used to prove whether there's actually anti-conservative bias baked into these algorithms, for example. It can be used as a means of redress and recourse for citizens who believe that they've been censored. We have to change the terms of this debate in society, or I fear we're actually going to be on the losing end. And the whole field of counter-FIMI is going to take an even bigger hit, and not just in the United States, but I think this is going to bleed over into Europe. So we have to really be vigilant as this part of the sort of the FIMI landscape is changing rapidly and is getting more and more critical, particularly in the context of transatlantic security and transatlantic policy discussions.
Gosh, thank you. Finally, Carl, podcaster, expert from the think tank Demos. What's changed as far as you're concerned in the last year?
All right, well, morning everyone. Well, we're not calling it disinfo anymore, which I feel like is a step forward. Like, massive props to EEAS for that. Was it 22 when High Representative Borrell kind of launched FIMI as a concept, that event in Brussels? That was, to this day, the favourite event I've ever gone to in my entire life in this world. It's been a massive step forwards. I think, like, by miles, the most important thing over the last year that's changed is what's happened in America, and there's no point thinking otherwise. I mean, it's changed absolutely everything. It's changed the funder landscape, it's changed the environment that researchers behave in, it's changed what we even have to think FIMI is. But I won't dive into that. David's already massively eloquently laid out all of those things. So I'll focus on sidebar. Changes to the way in which a social media platform works have to be seen as FIMI now, and we have to stretch our definitions there. Maybe we'll get back to that in the questions. I think there's been 3 big pivots over the last year. I think this has been quite a singular year, actually, in this kind of struggle for information integrity. And I think 3 pivots to me kind of sum up that window. First, what the threat is has changed, and it is to do with AI, but not in the way that everyone is talking about. Now, I know we spent the last year like freaking out about how generative AI might be vastly creating new powers and capabilities for our FIMI adversaries. That's not actually really what I worry about tremendously. I think that might be making some of those workflows a bit cheaper, a bit more effective, a bit more convincing. But what I really worry about is FIMI actually targeting those LLMs. Those LLMs interact with the internet all the time. They have training runs, they've got RAG processes, and what I'm seeing now emerging are basically the first really orchestrated, coordinated attempts, which I would call FIMI, to interdict those processes to change how those LLMs actually behave. If you go to Web Summit, as I do, you see thousands of startups spread around all over the world, every single one of which is using AI, or claiming anyway, to use AI in one way or another. And this time, for the first time, I saw startups that were describing themselves as AI SEO. So they're saying, oh, hey, we're just search engine optimization, but now that everyone's going to be using LLMs to learn about the world, we're going to basically replicate that in the LLM. Now, I'm sat there spending hours with these people, basically trying to understand what, in fact, they're doing. And what they're doing is spinning up increasingly sophisticated agentic models that reverse engineer how they think the LLMs are training, what they're paying attention to, and then basically desperately trying to spin up hundreds of thousands of different websites, carpet Reddit, carpet Wikipedia, in order to get your Nike trainers into that LLM prompt response. And obviously, that's got a massive commercial impetus. I mean, that is going to, I buy their argument, that's going to replace the whole of SEO, or a large chunk of it. And if you just transfer that capability and you move that into the world of our world, you can only imagine what states are going to be doing this sort of stuff. If I was a Russian or a Chinese or an Indonesian or anywhere in the world kind of FIMI actor, I would be doing nothing else than basically building a sovereign capability to try and manipulate LLMs at the moment. That's where the threat's going to go. And I think we're very, very flat-footed at the moment in terms of working out what we do to actually respond to that. Do we build capability? Do we try and pressure the LLMs? There's lots of LLMs now. There's going to be hundreds of these models in one way or another. What do we do? Don't know. So that's threat. Actor. I don't know about all of you, but over the last year, I've increasingly begun to think of the threat actors on the other side as kind of much more profit-oriented and almost like kind of startups than I have before. I think I've often supposed that these campaigns kind of emanate out of the kind of shadowy intelligence bureaucracies of autocratic states, but I don't really think that's often what's happening. I think they're buying services. I think they're getting in contractors. I think people that have learned information interference in autocratic states have kind of left and they've set up their own shops. And I see a lot of these kind of almost like startup entities basically doing FIMI, offering FIMI, selling FIMI. And they're specializing and they're innovating and they're trying to be disruptive and they're competing with each other. And there's much more of a marketplace for this, I think, and the dynamics that go along with the marketplace than I've seen in previous years. So I think that's quite a big change in the landscape. They're not entirely for profit. They certainly, many of these actors have relationships or maybe even command and control relationships with states, but they're behaving much more entrepreneurially. But then the third one, and probably the most important, is in terms of the response. So I think when this whole threat emerged, I think what we really, the first way we saw this was largely as a kind of cultural and a regulatory issue, and it kind of sat usually in cultural ministries, and most of the responses that we had were basically about trying to, in one way or another, strengthen the resilience of our populations to it. So it was like digital literacy training, and it was kind of fact-checking, and it was kind of journalistic kind of work, and I think that has massively changed, and I think the last year we've seen that quite clearly. I think now all the action is on disruption and response. I think the big question now is how on earth Do we introduce as much chaos and risk and failure as we possibly can into the people doing these sorts of things? How do we make their activities less profitable? How do we break their supply chains? How do we make it harder for them to recruit talent? How do we make it harder for them to innovate? How do we delegitimize the channels that they grow? How do we constantly wear away the digital assets that they have? I think that is the big question, and I don't think we've really solved that yet. I think the kind of next year, which will dictate, I think, whether this really succeeds or fails, will be a question of whether we can combine a kind of disruption entrepreneurialism on the one hand, like many, many more attempts, like many more ideas, new ideas about how to do this, like opening up new fronts, new sorts of pressure, new kinds of disruptions, building technology to aid us with those disruptions. You know, we haven't really had a debate yet around how AI can actually disrupt FIMI campaigns. It's all about how it can detect them. Well, that needs to be the new question. But then also we need to be, I think, ruthlessly pragmatic about which of these disruptions actually work. Like, how do you measure the kind of infliction of some kind of cost? It might not be first-order costs. Maybe it's costs to do with their coherence, or costs to do with the trust that they have, or costs to do with how expensive it is for them to reach their audience. There's lots of ways in which costs can be understood and conceptualized. But I think those two things will need to go together. We'll need to disrupt in many more ways, and we'll need to be very hard-nosed about which of those disruptions will work. And then lastly, I've increasingly become to see this whole area largely as being very much a coordination issue. Like there is so much coordination which needs to happen. It needs to happen within civic society, it needs to happen within government, it needs to happen between governments. Obviously there's lots of work happening within NATO RRM, G7 RRM, thanks to EEAS and lots of UK Gov colleagues here as well. That is beginning to happen. And I think the last kind of big determinant about what we're talking about next year will be over the next 12 months, sorry, I've already gone into future tense for you, Jessica, but over the next 12 months, will those veins of cooperation kind of really turn from, I think, something which is still quite aspirational into something which is meaningfully actually driving those disruptions against the adversary?
That is quite a challenge. Thank you, Carl. So looking at the year ahead, Filip, I'm going to turn to you. You've had quite a few challenges, not least by Carl laid down. What does the year ahead look like, and how do you meet those challenges?
It might sound silly, it might sound provocative, but I'm quite optimistic. Because everything that Carl described in terms of us being able to use AI to better spot disinformation, to how it's used by the threat actors. To tell you the truth, we are using AI. We are not talking about it maybe enough. It links with what Konrad was saying about how we communicate in the West. We prefer to somehow focus on the failures, on the things that bother us, rather than take pride of the success. But in fact, we are using AI a lot, and I think we will scale up. So what's new in the next 12 months is it's a better and more efficient use of the AI to deploy our campaigns, to move beyond pure communication, even strategic communication, into something different using AI, also involving the LLMs. How to bring the LLMs to the light side from the dark side. If they are already in the dark side, I don't know. I've had a number of discussions with different representatives of the LLMs, and the point that I'm trying to make, the message that I'm trying to pass, is that if you lose your credibility, if you're not considered as providing good service in terms of information integrity, you will lose money. So I have no doubt that the LLMs are about money. The mission there is to make money. And what they are selling is their credibility. And I think there is space for us to work on it together, to support each other. And regulations should not be seen, should not be presented as something limiting the LLMs, but rather supporting them in bringing this information integrity and their credibility to a new level. So that's on the LLMs. And on a more kind of bigger picture, from a bigger picture point of view, I think we need to move from, we moved from communication to security, now we need to move to policy, and we need to deliver on the policy front now. So when we support Ukraine, we should not limit ourselves to campaigns in Stratcom world. I mean, this is just not enough. If we promise to Ukraine to be part of the European Union, we should actually make the move to bring them in. So policy should follow, and then everything else will follow. So that's the policy side of that. And then the last point that I wanted to make, and sorry for being long, is that we've focused on our territory. So we are talking about the impact of disinformation in the UK, the impact of disinformation in the European Union. We sometimes also venture to the third countries. That's great, because that's where the battlefield is. But I think what we are getting more and more ready for is to move that to the Russian information sphere, to other information spheres, to other internets, basically to try to turn this proactivity into something different, something new, using AI, using everything that we know, not giving up of our high ethical standards. We don't lie, we don't manipulate, but there is a huge possibility for us to put a mirror in front of the Russian society and tell them, look, this is what you're becoming. Do you want to be that? Do you want to be this sort of a society? I don't think so. So we need to break into another internet and be more present there.
Would you accept Carl's phrasing that this is disruption entrepreneurialism?
It's one way of looking at it. When we talk about a whole society approach, I see it really well framed into that part of defining our responses. So I like it. Yeah.
Konrad, you have been living through in the last year really big Russian campaigns, not least your elections. When you're looking forward and taking some of the things Filip has talked about, how do you see some of the experience of the last year and how that should be deployed given the challenges of the year ahead?
Our elections in Poland was certainly a very challenging time for quite a lot of institutions in Poland, because we were expecting quite a lot of Russian interference or attempts at interfering elections. So we were preparing quite carefully. And we spent, I believe, last year, or more than last year, more than 1 year on completely revamping the Polish response system to FIMI threats. So we created this department in the MFA, which I'm probably a part of, but we also changed the way that we communicate between different institutions and ministries in Poland, in the spirit of a very fancy concept of whole of government approach. So we try to see how we can communicate better within the government, because what we see in Russian operations is that they're often very crude and fairly easy to design, but very, very well coordinated. And that was something that's some lessons learned from experience of Poland, but also other countries in NATO and EU, that our coordination and our responses were often not working completely up to the task. So that's something that we tried to fix last year. So we created some platforms where we can share information and share our insights before election, and it worked pretty well. But we also tried to get a little bit, not a little bit, quite intensively into a whole of society approach, because we realized that there is no way that government institutions can do it on their own. And we worked quite extensively, especially in field of monitoring the potential FIMI operations in Poland with the third sector, both in Poland and within European network of researchers that are analyzing FIMI, and we got some amazing results from them. We have our own analytical capabilities in Poland, absolutely, but they were providing us with gigabytes of data of potential operations that were going on that we could work with, and that's something that would be very difficult to do on a state level, and it also worked great. We created a body called Resilience Council, where we got representatives of civil society as the advisory body to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that is recommending particular policy steps or particular decisions that could bolster our resilience to FIMI. And it's working, and it's bringing some very good insights into the policy response. So that's why we were doing that. Not only to prepare ourselves for whatever would come during the presidential election, but one thing that Russia fears in a way is having a strong opponent. If you show them that you are very well prepared, that you are ready to respond, and that you have systems in place that will make their operations much more difficult or much more costly, then that might deter them from engaging in more, let's say, spectacular operations. And in a way, that's something that we've seen during the election in Poland. They were absolutely active, massive amount of coordinated authentic behavior, of cyber attacks. It was massive, but it was manageable. It was. I don't want to say that nothing new happened, but they didn't introduce any new techniques, tactics, or procedures during the election in Poland. Same old, maybe slightly more intensive. So there might be quite a lot of explanations to this phenomenon, why it happened like that, but I like the one where we've seen that the system was actually working. But it was half a year ago, so in the current geopolitical situation, it was like 25 years ago. Lots of things happened since the election in Poland. And I think that I would love to build on what Carl and Filip said about the AI, that is not only a threat, it's quite an opportunity for all of us. And just in the spirit of honesty with all of you, I think that us as Poland and European Union and NATO made quite a lot of mistakes in trying to fight with Russian FIMI operations in the last decade. I don't want to say that we lost, but certainly we were not as effective as we could have been. But AI, in a way, is a great leveler. That AI is coming and it's setting the board once again, where we can utilize these tools to be much more effective in countering whatever our adversaries want to do. And I absolutely agree that it's not only Russia, it's not the only adversary. I'm just talking about Russia all the time because that's the adversary that we know best in Poland, but that's what we see is Russia is actually exporting this let's say, FIMI toolbox that they have to other countries, and lots of entities and state and non-state entities are utilizing the way that Russians are operating there, in a way, spearheading the revolution in foreign interference all around the world. But we can use the AI to our advantage. Actually, we did an interesting thing in the morning after the drone incursions. We asked LLMs, quite a few models, who was responsible for this attack attack on Poland? And actually, quite a few of them that answered that it was definitely Ukraine's fault. Quite a lot of them. But we took some measures, and I think that if you ask this question right now, you will get much more truthful answer at the moment. And I think that this is the biggest battlefield that will be where we'll be active in the next year is LLMs and general this AI field in general. We see that the patterns of utilizing internet are changing right now quite heavily. Less people are using search browsers than they used to in the last few years. Sometimes chat or whatever LLM model is just the default place to ask questions online right now. So we need to ensure that the data that large language models are utilizing is is as truthful as possible. And yeah, we're working on that. We're working on that quite heavily. And I think that in the next year, I hope that we'll see some improvements. We'll see some improvements in that field, but it's already not that terrible. I mean, I'm very pessimistic, so always focusing on the worst possible scenarios and the worst possible side of things, but it's not so bad now yet. And I think that we'll make it better. And actually, next year we can meet up and you can ask me maybe questions whether we made it better or we did not. But cooperation with LLMs right now is an absolute key. And yeah, maybe
that is absolutely fascinating. David, you've heard the response in Poland, in the EU, but you talked about free speech absolutism in the US and increasingly in Europe. Are the responses you're hearing going to be adequate given that?
Well, I mean, I think they're adequate if they work. And
Yeah.
the debate over free speech to me is noise, and it's deliberately used to poison our work, our collective work. It is designed to denigrate and destroy the field that we all represent here today. But if we deliver results, it's one way to quiet that debate. I do think we have to do work on changing the terms of the public debate. But look, there are so many ways, there's so many examples that we can point to of counter-FIMI operations working. Poland's obviously an excellent case study in that. What's happened in Moldova, as you mentioned earlier, Konrad, is another example. I mean, if we think about investments in counter-FIMI, like Moldova is a great case to highlight to those who are skeptical, because you think about poor, historically under-resourced Moldova, which adopted a whole of government and whole of society approach in spite of all the noise, and it worked. So you had every government institution that was mobilized to unmask new pathways of FIMI operations, to make concrete attributions to specific state and non-state actors, or not non-state, but proxy actors of the Russian government, to communicate with their citizens. And then you had all these investments in civil society, the benefits of foreign assistance, American assistance, RIP, but European investments as well. And you had massive campaigns designed to pre-bunk Russian mis and disinformation. You had massive campaigns to support independent media. You had massive campaigns to essentially rally the Moldovan public towards a pro-EU path. And remember, in the last referendum, the country was divided nearly like 50-50, right, on whether Moldova should have a pro-EU trajectory. This time, it was an overwhelming vote of confidence in favor of that, right? So I think we have to do more to lift up the examples that work, to show the skeptics of our field, look, there wasn't censorship happening in Moldova. There was no censorship happening there. In fact, there was tons of free speech on both sides of the aisle. Now, some of the free speech was obviously being paid for and sponsored by the Russian government, but any narrative you wanted to consume, it was out there in Romanian and Russian language. So there was no censorship taking place. There was attribution of operations, but these were security threats to the integrity of the Moldovan state and the integrity of the Moldovan elections. Like, this is how we should be framing the terms of the debate. So I don't see this as a dichotomy in which counter-FIMI and freedom of speech can't coexist. In fact, I see this as reinforcing freedom of speech. We should have a free and open, we are democracies, we have free and open information domains, as we should. We should be extremely on guard about foreign entities who want to pollute and corrupt that space without attributing where the provenance of that content is coming from. Like that, it's hard for me to conceptualize how that's controversial, but it's become so. So we have to do more to lift up what has worked and demonstrate how it's not, there's no censorship involved in this. This is in the service of protecting free speech, free and fair elections, and democracy.
Thank you, that's really clear. Carl, you set out some challenges. You talked about the need for disruption, entrepreneurialism and coordination. From what you've heard and from what you know, are you optimistic about the year ahead or less so?
I am optimistic. No, I am. I think we will get on top of this. I think we are getting on top of this. Like, this is not, that Russia isn't this unassailable giant 3D genius test player, and a lot of the people doing FIMI operations aren't particularly bright. We can get on top of this, and I think we will. Although it's normally my job as a think tank to keep throwing out problems. That's kind of my job. So I'll throw out a couple more. And the first one, this is going to be like a reasonably geeky observation, like from like a detection point of view, but sometimes these are important. I don't think we're great at spotting their evolving tradecraft because you don't see what you don't look for. So the main way in which we do detection work is that we've got this whole bunch of TTPs that we know they use, and then we try and find signals for those. Sometimes those signals are like one person doing an OSINT investigation. Sometimes it's doing loads of scaled analytics, like what my team does. But it's, we find signals and then we focus on those. New TTPs, almost by definition, aren't part of that kind of collection, right? So what I worry about is that there's a ton of activity which we haven't really formalized or defined, which we therefore haven't built detection capability to really focus on, and therefore we're not looking for. It's the same, go back to 2016 in Facebook. They weren't looking for the manipulation, and therefore they weren't finding it, and therefore they were saying that it didn't exist. I think that you see that same loop happening everywhere. But so there's that, and I think look, we have to find a way of making sure that when anyone in this room sees a new compelling TTP, we can all see it. Like, we need to build a clearinghouse to mean that kind of information is much more nimbly and quickly shared. Because at the moment, I don't see that kind of route. I mean, I think EEAS is probably the most important conduit for that happening, and that's still quite a kind of staccato series of reports rather than anything more continuous, and it needs to become that. I think the other thing, what we really, really need is deterrence. This is all going to be about deterrence. And it's all going to be about coordinated international deterrence. Like, when you interfere in a NATO member state's election, it's not down to that member state alone to respond. That's what NATO's for. Like, we've got to develop a language, as we have across lots of other forms of geopolitical confrontation and hybrid warfare, where when the adversary does something we don't want, we do something back that they don't want. That there has to be that kind of dialogue happening. And I think one of the reasons that we see FIMI operations like so wantonly sprayed around the world, even when so often they don't work, is because there basically at the moment is no downside to doing it. There really isn't any cost that we're levying many times. And then finally on there, I think the first step towards a deterrence architecture is for us to sort out attribution more fulsomely. Now, like, kind of most of the detection capability, with some shining counterexamples, I think does still sit outside of government. That's where a lot of the innovation happens. That's where a lot of the technology is being built. But basically, almost no one in that world can attribute firmly. Very, very, very few organizations I see coming out with really confident, firm, safe attributions. That remains something that platforms can do and governments can do. And we've got to join those dots up better. I know it's hard to attribute if you're a government. I know that's a diplomatic act. I know that can have all kinds of kind of very important, significant impacts in terms of your relationship with the state that you're attributing, what happens to your diplomats in that state, loads and loads of other effects. But unless we're able to really directly tie the information maneuver that we see with the underlying actors that are doing it, be they commercial or be they state, then we can't really, in many ways, call it FIMI. We don't know. FIMI does depend on knowing something about the actor or saying something about the actor. So we've got to sort that out more, and I think that will begin to inch us towards this kind of deterrence.
Fascinating. I'm going to turn this over to all of you now. If there are any questions, please indicate, and somebody will come around with a microphone. Can you tell us your name and where you're from? And remember, this is all being live streamed, so this is on the record. Okay, this gentleman over here.
Yeah, hello. Yes, my name is Javier Ruiz. I'm the tech lead for Amnesty International in the UK, and So I'm very interested. I mean, I would have lots of questions. Obviously, I'm learning a lot. But my main question would be on the role of civil society, because we keep talking about the need to engage civil society. Obviously, civil society, one of the attributes that it needs to be independent from a state. So I think that presents some challenges. And I think particularly in the UK, the other thing that we are seeing is that, as Carl mentioned, but it hasn't really been picked up, that the main worry about the growth of authoritarianism in those discussions, platforms and maybe US politics are figuring a lot more prominently than Russia at this point. So I think that that's something that it seems a bit of a gap. But particularly on a very, very specific question, to go, it would be on something that we are seeing, that some colleagues are seeing with a lot of worry in Brussels, is the proposals for the registration of foreign actors, where quite a few NGOs from the civil society space are finding that their status is going to become very problematic if the EU takes a similar path as Russia in trying to control the civil society organizations, and also this idea of defining foreign in that way, that everything foreign, including civil society, is a risk. So that would be one question.
Fantastic. So two questions effectively. One, the role of civil society in countering, in the whole of society, FIMI response, but specifically on Russian attempts to brand civil society as foreign actors. Do you want to just pick up?
Sorry, the EU.
Yeah.
The EU branding civil society, there's a legislation coming to force the registration and conditions on civil society in the EU.
Okay, can you pick up that specific point?
Sure.
Filip?
I mean, whole of society approach by definition means engaging with the civil society. There is no other way. But we have to be smarter about that. Simple fact-checking might actually do a favor to the threat actors, because it might create buzz by calling those different campaigns with those sexy names, like Doppelganger, Portal Combat. We generate some buzz. And if you look at it from a perspective of publicity or advertising, if you translate advertising tools into the FIMI world, it works. So civil society will and has to play a role there with capacity building, with strengthening resilience of the society. But we have to be smart about that. And definitely, we as the European Union, the British government, we need to do everything we can to support civil society in doing that.
Okay, fantastic. Any other questions? Okay, can we have a concise question, please?
Yes, of course. My name is Hugo Martino. I was a student of film at Goldsmiths, University of London. And I did two things. The first one was a study on British electors with a Cambridge scholar, and I studied British politics on that regard. And the other one was I went to Ukraine a month ago, so I got to see firsthand impact of Russia. And my question is, how do you counter the psychology in all of this? Because one thing that came up a lot, and you saw a big increase in, for example, parties that are in the UK that are known to be quite close to, or were at least quite close to Russia, like Reform. And my question is, how do you counter the psychological effect? Because I had a fellow that I interviewed, which was really interesting because he was afraid of Putin. And he first started talking about Putin. It was like, we have to be careful about people like Putin. And then he said, but also people like Starmer. And he was completely afraid of the entire political establishment, because I feel by talking to a lot of people who are voting for these parties that are really close to Russia, there's this sort of increasing paranoia, this bubble around these people. They're completely scared of everything, including the Russians themselves. So it's completely irrational and emotional. So my question for you is, how do we counter the psychological narrative with citizens, perhaps less educated citizens? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask you that, Konrad. What, from the Polish experience, would you say the answer to that was?
Well, I wish I had some magic key response how to do that, but it's really difficult. And I'm going to start my answer with, it's going to sound like incredible cliche, but it actually happened to me yesterday evening when I was I took a cab and I was driving to the hotel, and there was a really nice driver, really chatty one. You know the type, right? He always wanted. So
in the UK or Poland?
In the UK. Yesterday here in London, and he asked me a question. Well, mate, where are you from? And I said, from Poland. He said, who? The war. I said,
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it could have been better. And he said, yeah, the war in Ukraine, the drones, but you know who really started the war in Ukraine, right? And I said, I think I do, but can you elaborate? And as you might imagine, he didn't think that it is Russia's fault. Whatever is happening in Ukraine right now, he didn't see this as their responsibility. He spurted out the full set of this disinformation narratives that we know and love and analyze to the death. But yesterday I had the opportunity to actually talk to this person. So this is on personal level. I'll go to the institutional level in a moment, and it was actually giving the most basic facts and statements worked best yesterday. I didn't have full time because I arrived to my hotel, but the guy was almost convinced by the end of the ride by saying that I used the arguments that that Putin can stop the war anytime he wants. That it's quite difficult to see this neo-Nazi regime, Ukraine neo-Nazi regime, as as a interesting narrative, because it makes no sense if you look at it closely, and so on and so forth. Just walking through the basic facts. I had time and attention and patience for the narratives that this person was utilizing. I don't know if I were successful, but certainly he finished that ride with maybe some additional ideas in his head. But that was easy part, because I have time, space, and his attention. How can you get time and attention and space when you're operating in the state level? And the thing here is that, in a way, it ties to the previous question. I think it is impossible to do without the huge engagement of civil society, because I am not a fan of trying to work all of our problems in terms of communication, utilizing social media and doing social media campaigns and getting these clicks, likes, views. It looks great on paper. It doesn't work that great in reality. What we've noticed is that what works best is actually working on the ground, offline. What we try to do right now in Poland is to utilize a network of something called Regional Centers for International Debate. This is the chain of 10 community centers that we have around Poland in major cities that are being sponsored by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but they're led by NGOs that won in an open bid for this to operate these centers for 2 years. So what we try to do is let's say for the plans that the plan that we outlined for these centers for the next 2 years, we said that please focus on countering FIMI operations, on spreading knowledge about it, but especially focus on building communities around you of people that are interested in international relations. There are lots of people who are interested in that, but if they do not get a coherent and well-devised communication from the government, they will look for answers in other places. And these other places usually mean like YouTube clips with yellow subtitles, if you know what I mean. And so we try to work a little bit more offline. And what we are engaging in right now is the new program that we have of something called depolarization debates. Because we've noticed that in these regional centers, we noticed that what Russians are trying to do in Poland in terms of their narratives and communication is to increase polarization, because it just makes it much easier for them to conduct any other operations. I know it sounds fairly easy, but it works, right? That's what they've been working on in Poland for years. And we are trying to utilize this network of this community centers that we oversee to create We have a series of events, of depolarization debates, where we've got a special NGOs that specializes in this depolarization debates. They take people from different parts of political spectrum, they put them in a room, around 20 people, and they ask like a very difficult question about migration, abortion, or in Poland, this is a difficult question, it's another topic. So migration, the EU, Russia, are asking a question that is controversial, and they see that people in the room are fairly easily dividing into two groups, pro and opposite. You know how the polarization works. We're in the UK, so, and every country also has, I believe, right now has the same problem. But then the moderator is trying to lead on discussion into the area where they see that there are common points, that they might not agree on everything, but there is some common ground. And this is just a minor thing. We are not going to fix the debate in Poland, in Europe, or in the world by a few depolarization debates, but it shows the direction that we are trying to take. Work offline, decrease the social tension, build communities, because that's what builds resilience, not very popular clips on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, or whatever. Because so that's something that we will try to do in the upcoming years, to work with the civil society, with this resilience council that I mentioned, that gets all the representatives of different CSOs in Poland that try to assist us and help us in creating policies. But yeah, sorry. This is my favorite topic. Sorry.
It is totally fascinating. Yeah. We have got time for one very brief final question, and then we have a coffee break. There's one gentleman there.